He did something illegal at the company and he had to leave the United States. It was that horrible.
Helen, this is not where I thought this conversation was going to go.
Everyone in the world is born in relationship. We're wounded in relationship, and we can only be healed in relationship.
All right. Welcome to Open Relationships. I'm your host, Andrea Miller. I'm joined by my amazing colleagues, Jonas Koffler, Joanna Schroeder, and Bryon Atkins, our producer. So let's just spend a few seconds up front here talking about our show's mission, since we're still brand new. Our goal is to help people truly open up to one another, but critically to themselves, and being able to look at those hard truths about ourselves. Most of us have a tough time managing conflict or others' perspectives when they differ from our own. So many of us believe we have the objective truth. Not only believe, we are sure we have the objective truth. And so this idea of the show is in part to help people understand that that other isn't a threat or an enemy, but that by being a lot more comfortable with other and things that are different is our path to intimacy, to feeling a lot closer, right? And rather than the heartache and separation that so many of us feel, it is learning how to be more open. And so the goal is to see each other's differences, but critically learn to face our own hard truths and those things that, even as I like to say, sometimes we're lying to ourselves and it's hard to understand or see that. So where we're being defensive, petty, judgmental, afraid, closed, where we have our blind spots, that's the goal of the show, is to help each of our listeners go, oh yeah, maybe that's what I'm doing, right? And wherever that conflict might lie, a political difference or a difference with your partner in terms of raising kids, wherever there's that difference and we're feeling like that person is so wrong and maybe really stupid too, where we say, not so fast. We want to open up our hearts and minds so that we can transform together. So we have a great show coming up. Thanks so much for tuning in, and let's kick off. We've got some amazing guests today. Holy smokes. We've got Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt. But before we go there, I am eager to do a little beta test of something I'm calling Keeping It Real, right here in Open Relationships. We're really trying to get in and showcase what we're talking about and advocating and for and espousing and so forth. So the goal here is to share our wins and fails with friends, spouses, kids, etc., where we've had that experience where we've either crushed it, like, oh my God, I did it differently, woo! Or, oh shit, I fucked it up again. Sounds like me.
I've got one.
Oh, you got one? Okay,
Yeah.
Joanna, you kick us off.
I love TikTok. We use it for work at YourTango because we want to know what people are thinking and feeling. And so we scroll it. We come up with ideas, and as we talk to the people who are making the videos. Well, I had been seeing a lot of relationship TikToks that I felt like reflected some mistakes that my husband and I were making. And I didn't realize that I was flooding him with really negative relationship commentary by sending him like 3 or 4 TikToks a day that, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, these are really helpful because they're identifying a problem we have. And he was receiving them like, oh, another problem we have. Oh, great. Okay. And to the point where I was sending him TikToks of like cute things, like puppies and whatever, funny things. And he wasn't opening that because he started to have this negative association with them. And I was like,
well, because you were telling him he was wrong, right? You're saying essentially
he was taking it as, here's another problem we have, or here's another thing you do. Even if what I might have typed along with it was, oh, I totally do this, I need to stop doing this. It's still like, oh, more problems. And it was like weeks of me doing this, being like, oh my gosh, TikTok's so helpful. And then all of a sudden being like, And he hates it, and he never wants to see the words TikTok.com again.
I guess to him, you're like dwelling on it instead
Yeah.
of like not thinking about it. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And I probably wasn't contextualizing them enough, because like we say, it's, you assume everyone's going to feel about it how you feel about it, but someone else might listen to it and be like, oh, I see what this is. This is how you're telling me I do such and such wrong, when it wasn't at all.
Yeah. No, there's like ADHD memes is like a subreddit, and people will make jokes about their ADHD or whatever. And some of them are really, really funny. And one of them recently was like, people with ADHD, I guess, have a higher sense of like the need for justice, and so I saw that and was like, oh my God, especially because it was like, if you have ADHD friends, they're not okay right now. And so I like jokingly like sent that to my fiance, and she is like, don't dwell on this, you know what I mean? And I'm like, crap, I thought it was funny, but you're right, I'm totally like absorbing that.
Yeah. Now, but hang on, do you have ADHD, or does she, or both?
So I don't, I won't say that I do, because I'm not diagnosed, but it is one of those things where I had one of those dads that was like, my kid's not going to be on medication, so there was a lot of early warning signs for it. And then I was just told to, man up and deal with it. And I mean, like, he was the type too, like when I was a baby and I had like a pacifier, he like threw it out the window because he was like, no, you need to learn how to do it without any help, or whatever. So it's just like, I kind of grew up with that like old school mentality where as I've gotten older, I've been like, I'm probably pretty undiagnosed with this. Like the warning signs have been there, but like, I don't know. It is one of those things where I go like, should I go get a diagnosis? But then I'm also like afraid of what the diagnosis might be, All
right, so this sounds like a whole other show for us. Thanks for sharing. I mean, for real. I think that, that speaks to, I think, a lot of us both, certainly I'm a parent of a teenage boy and a 10-year-old boy, right? And it's like, how common is this? Like, is it a diagnosis that is, just more prevalent, right? I feel like there are a lot of questions that come up with along these lines.
Gabor Mate maintains that 70% of our population is on some kind of chemical antidepressant or treatment for a variety of disorders. So it's, it's hugely prevalent, right? I was thinking about something else, Andrea, in terms of the ticking hands of time, the TikTok of real life, we can say. How's that? And I got news earlier today, some somber news, that a family friend had passed away. And I started thinking about mortality, and I started thinking about longevity and how relationships are intricately linked to our health and well-being and our longevity, right? As Wallinger's study, many others have documented. And I thought about relationships and what I've been observing of myself of late, and the power of the relationship with the self, with myself for that matter, and focusing on things like self-acceptance and broadening and heightening my self-awareness and self-care for that matter, and then translating that into my relationship with my daughter. And that culminated in this indelible experience of being able to play soccer with her. Now, she's only 4 years old, but truly being present and absorbing every millisecond of that experience, and ensuring that it was just the most amazing shared journey that we could have together, and having that time capsules like the movie Inside Out, where those wonderful illuminating fill up your mind and percolate into your heart. And so for me, it was slowing down at the same time, really kind of sucking the marrow out of life to enjoy the richness of the limited time that we have here, and how that played out with my daughter was a wonderful win for me.
Oh, it's amazing to me. I feel like, I'm 52, so, having lost people along the way, and, the hurt and the heartache that inevitably occurs in, in the lives of the people that I love, right? It's always that profound wake-up call to go, whew, especially as moms and dads, ambitious moms and dads like we are, to go, gosh, let's not squander this, right? They're only little boo-boos for so long. it's graduation time. I feel like I'm chatting with a lot of parents and they're like, oh my God, I'm hearing cats in the cradle and wah, and my kid's only 13 and I'm already getting a little nervous about what's going to happen in 5 years as he goes off. And then I got a little one still so I'm like 8 years before I'm empty nester and I'm already feeling it.
It should be illegal to play that song. That song is too sad.
It is way too sad. All right, new DJs, we want to put you on notice. No more cats in the cradle. All right, we've got some amazing guests today. We've got Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt. I'll be talking about their incredible background momentarily, but just to give a little bit of context, they have developed the Imago dialogue, and we're going to be talking about the steps of the Imago dialogue. Before we speak with Harville and Helen, they've been these pioneers in love and relationships and creating safe conversations, and have been training and influencing some of the foremost experts and even rock stars in the world.
I mean, speaking of them being pioneers, when I was pulling up information on them earlier for research for the show, I mean, I saw that they've been consistently publishing books since 1988. I mean, their most recent one's even 20. Like they're constantly on the forefront for the last 40 years.
Yeah, no, they're definitely OGs. So we're super excited to have them as guests, and stay tuned for lots of great insights from Harville and Helen.
Real quick, we have our guest in the lobby. Should we welcome onto the show?
Yes. Yeah. I am thrilled to welcome our guests, Harville Hendrix, Ph.D., and Helen LaKelly Hunt, Ph.D. They are the OGs in love and relationships, like the OGs, right? And so I'm just going to take, about 15 minutes to read about their backgrounds that are very illustrious. I promise, not 15. But just stay tuned in here because you'll understand why they are genuinely the OGs. Harville and Helen are internationally renowned couples therapists, educators, speakers, and New York Times best-selling authors. Between the two of them, they have written over 10 books with more than 4 million copies sold, including the timeless classic, Getting the Love You Want, A Guide for Couples. But that's not it. I'm going to keep going. There's so much more here, guys. Harville and Helen co-created Imago relationship therapy, to promote the transformations of couples and families. And from that, co-founded Imago Relationships International, a nonprofit that has trained over 2,000 therapists and educators in 51 countries. Most recently, they've started a very, very ambitious initiative called Safe Conversations. That's a dialogue process to help people experience safety in all the conversations in service of creating a more relational world and helping people build healthy relationships, which we sorely need right now. We're going to come back to that. Harville is an all-time Oprah favorite. He has appeared on the Oprah show, get this, 17 times. You're like, I'm like the New York, Saturday Night Live. Like, was it Tom Hanks, right? You're like the prize favorite of the Oprah show, Harville. Congrats for that. And then finally, on a very personal note, Harville and Helen have been wonderful friends to me and my husband, Sanjay. They've been great supporters of our business, Tango, YourTango. And they were there with us from the very beginning, about 20 years ago. So I'm profoundly grateful to you guys for being on our show. And we have a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. Let's just start with maybe that proverbial softball. Why relationships? What led you to pursue this kind of healing work?
I'm going to jump in.
Okay.
I love the fact that that we're born, and everyone in the world is born in relationship. We're wounded in relationship, and we can only be healed in relationship. So basically, people look at people, but they don't study relationships. And that's what this guy was talking about when I met him.
And so, but to respond to how we got into this topic, is that we were both divorced, i.e. we had relational failures. And we met at a party that neither one of us wanted to go to, and began a conversation. And the conversation was, how come we're divorced? Who would want to divorce Helen? She is a magnificent, world-class, beautiful woman, and I'm not too bad looking. And we got into that conversation, which was about why are we divorced, which led to the question, why is anybody divorced? Which led to the question, what is conflict and why do couples fight? That led to the question, why does anybody fight? And that led to the development of an intellectual system that had to do fundamentally with relationship conflict.
Well, and so when Harville was trying to figure out why would someone divorce him, he was thinking about it, and he suddenly called a group of people together at in a garage at a house of worship where people can come to the sanctuary of a house of worship on Sunday, but on the Saturday, they have speakers go into a garage and they have wrought iron chairs and a speaker will speak. And I was on the front row. He was in front of a chalkboard. He went, all of us want, when we're an adult, to find the perfect partner, and we'd like to get married. And we met the person, wow, we get married, romantic attraction. So on the chalkboard, he put romantic attraction and underlined it, stage 1. What did that mean? So then he drew a line, and the second he wrote power struggle. Now, everyone in romantic attraction ends up in the power struggle. So they can either live their entire marriage in conflict, arguing, or just having relationships with their family, but not with each other. Or sadly, many of them divorce. Now, power struggle, people need to learn stage 3, real love. If you learn a few things in stage 2, everyone can get to stage 3. So I heard him giving this talk, and I began to follow him around, and I was divorced, and so we met at this party. You were speaking about it, but I said, Harville, and more people were enjoying him giving this talk, and I said, what's your dream? He said, well, I want to write a book about my theory. So we lived in Dallas, and I didn't think there was a publisher good enough here. So I said, if you marry me, let's move to New York, and we'll get the book written. I'll find an agent of a really big publisher. And
wow, I never knew this. This is so cool.
And I hired an agent, and she found the publisher, and then I was a good dialogue partner. I had gotten a master in counseling psych. So while the structure of it all is Harville, I could track it because I too had a degree in psychology. And I had done some primal therapy, which is the issues of your childhood that are within you. I had become someone who worked with a primal therapist under my counseling degree. And so I proposed, and a couple years later, the book came.
Wait, you proposed? You proposed? You proposed what?
My first husband talked me into marrying him, and I didn't want to. And everyone around me said, "Oh," and he was at I'm from a family-owned business. He basically wanted to work in the family-owned business, and then he did, and everyone said, "Oh, you should marry him." And I married him, but he wasn't a thought partner at all. And he did something illegal at the company, and he had to leave the United States. It was horrible.
Helen, this is not where I thought this conversation was going to go. We're talking, like reprobates and, rogue exes.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can share more detail because actually it was sort of famous in Dallas at the time. But
oh, wow.
I was going to pick the next guy I married. My mother was born, and my mother lived in the era of the subordinate wife. You should be the subordinate wife.
Oh, sure.
Well, my adult career isn't about subordinating to men.
Oh, no kidding.
But then the real shift, I mean, this is an example of how humanity changes over time. The subordinate wife. No one, who would do that now? We have a process that when it gets out into the world, the whole world needs this. And we think our vision that if we could get safe conversations into the world, we could create a whole new global humanity.
Yeah, but
I totally agree, and I want to come back to that because I feel like it may feel good to be superior, but that superior dominant relationship is so unhealthy, right? And when we talk about it in our show in open relationships, how important it is for all of us to do our own work, and if you're not held to account as a partner, as a mom, as a sister, as a friend, if it's dominant subordinate, you never have the chance, or most people don't take the chance to really look at those hard truths inside of themselves, right? And we'll come back to that. But I know a lot of people are like, oh, it would just be so much easier if I could just, have my way all the time. But even coming back to your point about, we're born in relationship, and there, that's the root of so much, if not almost all, suffering and trauma, and it's the way out of it. Yeah. So I love that you're setting us up perfectly, because I don't think people appreciate. I always say, great relationships are not a nice to have. They are a need to have. And so few people really understand what it takes, both in terms of how much time it takes, the intention, being open, right? So that's why I love the work that you guys are doing and the attention that you're bringing to it, and the fact that you've been educating. I mean, Sanjay and I feel like that's when we got really close to you guys, was when we did, like 15 years ago in New York, we did one of your amazing workshops.
Yeah, and it doesn't take long to learn it, but you have to learn
totally,
and it's you feel better, and so it's a process that, as you said, it can be learned on a weekend or a day.
So Harville and Helen write content for us for YourTango, and we had an article of theirs, and I asked them to add an example of how people could practice a safer conversation with their partner in their article. And Harville went through and added this wonderful dialogue. And once I read that, I showed my husband, and we tried it. And I realized, okay, this is easy to do, but it's almost like a muscle memory, something that needs to be developed over time and practiced.
It's a practice,
right?
It ends up genuinely being a practice, because you can get it in your head, but unless you do it, it's a nice theory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we think about it as a skill that you have to practice. And it's as concrete as, the example I like to use is tennis. I don't know why I play tennis, but maybe golf is the same thing. I do play a little golf. Well, that's a good one. The last time I went to golf had been a year since I'd held a club. So I just walked up to the golf ball and hit the ground instead of the ball. So it's a skill that you have to practice over and over. In tennis, in both of them, you have to. I remember my brother, who was coaching me, but he was no better player than I was, but he remembered the rules better, said, remember that you need to keep your eye on the ball when you swing the club. And I found if I did that, I hit the ball. If I didn't do that, I hit the ground. And it's like that. You have to actually follow. It's the physics. You have to follow the rules, or you don't develop the muscle training that makes it possible to eventually play golf without hitting the ground all the time, or even having to think. So,
well, you have to, it's being very intentional, right? Like you really have to concentrate on it.
Well, and we imagine, given our experience over about 40 years now of doing this workshop and working with couples, that couples need to put, probably it will take 6 months to 2 years for couples to really integrate it into their relationship as a new way to talk. It's not just something to do when you have a problem and you need to talk about it. The thing is, if you change the way you talk, you won't have those problems, because most problems have to do with talking, and talking in a way that polarizes or criticizes the other person. So we basically have now sort of narrowed our focus to, Helen calls it, that I know how to make things simple. And the simple is this: talking is the most dangerous thing people do.
Wait, what? Say that again.
Talking is the most dangerous thing most people do. And now the second sentence is listening is the most infrequent thing people do. And when you consider that talking is dangerous, because usually people talk, we call it a monological position. You were talking before about dominance. That this, I call this the vertical position. I'm up here talking to you, but you're down here.
Yeah.
So you need to listen and believe what I say or do what I say. And it makes you unequal to me. Just by the structure. When I'm monologuing, I'm assuming that you don't know it and you need to learn it from me. And that's a huge put down. But it's been the way talking has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years, the monological talking. So what we have marketed now about 40 years ago is what we call dialogue, which is dialogical talking is lateral, not vertical. And in fact, I've come to believe, and I was actually said something to you either a night or two ago, Helen. I've come to believe that this, what I call the vertical or verticality, is the human problem. And that's been the human problem for thousands of years. And that it slowly changed. It changed in the revolutions of the 15th century, which moved from monarchy to democracy. So changed a little bit, and but not all the way, because there was their freedom, but not equality. But talking, and Helen gives a piece of this lecture. She says, yes, but then the monarchy may have been destroyed, but people still did monologue.
Parallel.
That is, they went to parallel
monologue instead of dialogue.
And nobody's listening. But just what you have to have is a sender and a receiver, and they are equal.
Yeah.
And when they're equal,
they take turns.
And then that's what creates safety. That's what makes talking safe, is that one talks and the other one listens. And then that person talks and the other person listens. And they listen and talk without criticism or judgment. It's just exchanging. And it is a skill. It's also a science, because we now have data. We're not brain scientists, but we are avid consumers of the research of brain science.
Yeah.
That in fact, Harvard University has done some research on conversation, and they put people in an fMRI machine and discovered that the conversation actually does change the center of focus in the brain from the defensive, scared part of the brain to the pleasure center in the brain. That, in other words, talking in a certain way changes the processes in the brain. And there's again a lecture Helen gives about neuroplasticity. If you talk in that new way over and over and over again, you'll develop a new neural network, which means that now it's just like tennis. You develop a new neural network, then that new way of talking becomes spontaneous. Although it's structured at the beginning, it becomes spontaneous. And now you have a new way of being in relationship all the time, not just when you have a problem, but whenever you talk.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about with this was how when you practice these types of safer systems, I love that you were saying we get out of the defensive and into something that can be pleasurable, and that sounds healing, that you also over time may be able to reframe how you see your partner. If it's a romantic partner or your child or whoever, once you stop monologuing and you start to understand what they meant to say, not what you think they're saying, over time, I feel like your brain becomes more receptive to the fact that that person might have my best interests at heart, or that person might not be trying to harm me. And without that safer setup, you may never learn that. You may never be able to default to giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's how it's felt to me, at least.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to chime in and say, when I think about communication, right, a lot of people will say, including my husband, we have communication issues. And at times I feel like, oh, that can be really tricky because it's like, and yes, Harville, I'm with you. We should all be listening more, right? But I feel like, when people say, well, one of the biggest problems is communication, I feel like that's a mechanical thing. And so I kind of want to,
Agree.
kill the myth over here.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's really coming from like what you're describing, that place of openness. And, you said without criticism and judgment. Right. And, let's just dive into the whole business of safe conversations, because I don't think it's a communication problem. I feel like it's something else. So yeah, so let's go there, because I want to disavow this myth of, hey, we've got a communication problem. It's like we have a perspective problem, or we're defensive, or, something else is happening. And so it's not the communication. So help people understand this better.
And it really is important to learn the things in stage 2 that then can move someone into the stage of real love. And some of them, everyone has a childhood challenge or something that in growing up, they didn't like and they wished had been better. And in romantic attraction, you're drawn to a person, according to the theory, who has a childhood challenge that is different from your childhood challenge. And the two people need to learn to have empathy for each other. And so that's part of, there's a 3-step process of dialogue. There's a sender and a receiver, where the two of them take turns making a statement. One person makes a statement and the other mirrors, says, let me see if I got it right. Well, usually they didn't. So you say, did I get it?
By the way, I've been amazed to see sitting there, well-intentioned people at your workshops, the guy says, blah, 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 and the woman says, and, or vice versa, doesn't matter, male to male, woman to woman, doesn't matter. And then the woman goes, or the receiver says, did I get it right? How many times they'll go back and forth, and you're just sitting there going, wait, you're not listening. But it's like there's that emotional barrier that's causing people, that receiver, to genuinely, even if they're trying hard, to genuinely not get it. So I think what you guys have developed is genius. And I think people, folks, maybe we can append a link to this in the show notes, because if you watch, you will see how challenging this can be. Right. And then if you do it, you're like, I just said it. But you got to be patient, because then maybe you need to say it again in a different way. Right. And I feel like that's so foundational to your instruction. It's like really, really being open. Right. That's back to the safe conversation. Not like, hey, dummy, no, you didn't get it right. Please try again. Right. But that's important. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just had to make that point, because it is not trivial. This is not trivial.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
A short sentence, and then Harville will probably want to have a much longer. But one of the things I appreciated hanging around Harville, who became my husband, he said, we have a problem, and the problem is the value system of the culture. Everyone is taught from the time they're young, we want you to be the best. In grade school, middle school, upper school, get the best book report, get A's at school. And then if you get enough good grades, by the time you go to high school, maybe you could get to a college. And then if you get a college and then you get a degree, if it's a doctor's degree or an architect degree or whatever, then you're just focused on doing it in the best way because you want you wanted to create the best podcast and the most interesting topic. So it's about being the best. But that being the best is bad, but it shouldn't be the only value system. If it's being the best, it's like, well, if I have a thought, it's the best thought, right? Because I'm usually the best. And no one is taught. We think the value system of the culture should teach people how to have relationships, not when they have a crisis in their marriage and they need to see a therapist. We think safe conversations exist now for kids, for high school students to learn. And when they learn it, they have a healthier brain and they feel better.
No.
Right.
I was just going to add quickly, it's amazing and so refreshing to hear you say that, because it's worth asking the question in terms of our education system. Why aren't we taught this skill set, this practice as children, right? If we're to evolve as a culture, as a society, as a world, as a planet.
We were doing a public workshop once, and a woman called. We never met her in person, but she said, I heard your lecture about relationship. I'm the head of a psychiatry department. And it was in another city, another state. And she said, our psychiatry department, when someone is suicidal and they've attempted suicide, or they're so anxious they can't sleep, they check into our psychiatry department to try to, what can we do? So we medicate them, we isolate them from their family, and we medicate them and give them all sorts of things, maybe just have quiet, not have to deal with their family. And she said, I think what they need is to meet with their family and resolve their problems. And I actually drew up a little piece of paper that she said, for the first time in the history of the world, you have created a teachable process on how to have a relationship. And as you know, maybe, Andrea, the theme of it is dialogue. Well, this psychiatrist called us in 2018, but then I put together this chart that the other person that taught dialogue was Socrates in 300.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Well, and guess what happened?
For the win.
Socrates created dialogue, Socratic dialogue.
It makes sense. The Socratic method, right? Asking questions. Boom.
Yes. Well, but the head of the Greek government didn't like it, and they put him to death. Remember that he was disrupting?
Yeah, totally.
Greece. So this is where, once he died, we've had pharaohs that a god told pharaohs how to run a country, and so the pharaohs had a lot of slaves. And then we've had monarchs or kings or whatever. There were serfs, but the point was to obey the head of the country. Well, the French didn't like that, so the French had a revolution, and one was equal. And then the United States had an American. They didn't want the King of England to control people who went to the New World. So there was the American Revolution. Well, actually, if people haven't noticed, in the United States, our four political parties don't agree every day. At the end of the day, the opposite.
That's an understatement.
And this is why dialogue needs to be taught. at school and
Yeah.
everywhere.
Well, but I think what's so important, back to the point you guys were making a few minutes ago, this whole business of the vertical and how hierarchical it is, and something I wanted to chime in on. I'm gonna out myself here. At times, I've got the two greatest kids in the world. Sorry to all the other parents, but mine are the best. Just kidding. But you know what I'm saying. Like, very proud mama, great boys. And at times I'll find myself, I'm not deliberately speaking down to them, right? They're wonderful kids, but there is that superiority inferiority balance. Now, a lot of parents are going to say, "Well, of course, you're the mom, and you got to tell them what to do." But what I've observed is when I'm more mindful that that they're not inferior to me, that I want to, what you're describing is be that equal sender and receiver, right? When I change my energy, right, and it's subtle, but it is amazing how much more responsive they are. Oh, by the way, it also works with husbands, right? But that's why I was saying a little while ago, it's like not the communication, it's not the words, right? It's that intention of, I actually want to maybe that's what it is. Like, I want to hear you. And I love that. I feel like with your dialogue process, did I get that right? Is there more? Right? I feel like what's really implicit in what you guys are teaching people, like, you're creating that mechanical process and, and obviously really underscoring this whole business of how important it is to have that safety. Because if you're like, is there more? Like, are you done already? Like, that's not going to be effective. Then you're like, nope. And then, your arms are crossed and you're ready to go. But I really wanted to underscore that, we're talking about all relationships here. We're talking parent and child, both ways, me talking to my parents, me talking to my kids, my husband, my friends, my colleagues, right? That I just feel like it is that mindset and heart set, if you will, of, and Harville, you said it, this whole business of listening. Like, I feel like we need to reframe the business of talking and really prioritize listening. And maybe even back to, you said, the value system of the culture. Doesn't our culture value, you're talking about the politicians, blah, 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 talk, 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 dominate, 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 right? So it feels like we really need to normalize and prioritize and value listening. And here I am, like, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to mute myself.
I want to get across, and I'm trying to get this across now wherever we talk, that verticality, I think, is the human problem. In fact, it's probably a disease, and that we're trying to cure. And the only way to cure it, because this is all inequality. All verticality is inequality. Inequality creates anxiety. Anxiety creates defenses. Defenses make it impossible to relate and to interact.
Yep.
We have to go to the vertical, to the lateral, and to a new way of talking that Helen and I are calling dialogue. And in that new way of talking, to pick up now with the culture, Helen often in a lecture says, you have a part of your lecture, you get rewarded in our culture for talking, but nobody rewards you for listening unless you're a therapist. We are the only profession that basically gets paid to listen. And that our clients tell us that it's the quality of our listening to them that heals them, not our brilliance or anything that we do to them. It's the quality of the interaction between the client and the therapist. Well, you just move that over to Helen and me. It's the quality of our interaction that heals us or keeps us safe, which is, in fact, becoming safe is essential to healing. So to do that, but I want to add something and get us a little bit off the hook about listening. And that at one end, my theological mentor back in graduate school was Paul Tillich, who was the public theologian.
Oh, wow.
And
wow, I never knew that. Oh, cool.
He was my mentor, and I studied with him at Chicago. And And what I didn't know until later, when I was looking over his materials after he died, and not too long ago, and in one of his public lectures, he said, "Listening is the first act of love."
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice, sweet comment, but it is a profound insight, because love is seeing the other person for who they are. And you can't see them for who they are unless you listen to them when they are showing themselves to you as they talk. That is such a profound reality.
That's beautiful.
What makes that profound for us is that love is love between people who see each other as they really are.
Yeah.
Most of us do not see our partners as our partners see themselves. We see them the way we need to see them for ourselves. I need to see that you see me. That's my problem. That's not Helen's problem. I need to see Helen the way Helen sees herself and accept the way Helen sees herself. Then I'm getting Helen, not my version of Helen. And if I love my version of Helen, I'm loving me. But if I love Helen's version of Helen, I'm loving Helen. In order to get Helen, I have to listen without criticizing and judgment. Now, here's my problem. This is new information for us. I scour research all the time because I don't want to be caught out in the cold with something that's, that the research field, especially in the area of relationships. And this is a stunning piece of information. The way our ears are designed, we distort 70% of the information that comes to our ears. The electromagnetic waves that bring messages to us, we can only receive accurately 30% of them. So anytime you start listening, you're already at a 70% disadvantage. Now, add to that you're running in your mind at the same time your own narrative about who this person is I'm talking to, why are they saying that to me, what are they going to say to me? You're running a narrative that's interfering at another level with listening. I can't get Helen if I'm wondering what she's going to say to me. I have a hard time getting her even when on a good day, when I'm not disturbed or running my message, because my ears are not developed enough to receive everything she's saying. So, and I'll say in a few minutes why I think that's the case with the ear. But I have to be, this is why we built into the dialogue system, did I get you? Over again. So that what you saw when people said, did I get you? They would say, well, not quite. That's not quite what I said. So we teach them, that's going to happen. So say it again and send it again. Now, I have in many cases backed people down to, mirror back one word at a time. Now mirror 2 words. Now mirror 3 words to get them relaxed. So that they could get pieces of information. And what was amazing to me back when I was learning this is that the person who had sent the message was okay with that. What they wanted was to be mirrored. And if person had to do 1 word at a time, fine. Couldn't do it elegantly, like everything at once, was okay. They just want, we need to know that we've been heard. That is a human heard and seen. So that's why we slow people down to do this. So I've been wondering, how come the ear is 70% deficient, the structure of the ear? And I can't find an answer to that in the research. So I made one up. And I often find that I can make up stuff and and later on somebody does research that is correct, because this is logic.
We call that, we scientists call that a hypothesis.
It's a hypothesis.
Harville, you've got a hypothesis. You've got a very informed hypothesis.
Okay.
And now we're listening. We're listening.
It's giving me some status now. Okay. So this is this is giving me my hypothesis. But and you make up a hypothesis because you don't have any data.
Mm-hmm.
But you imagine this would be true if we could find the data. So Helen says that we get rewarded in our culture for talking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but we don't get rewarded for listening. So that means two or three things are going on. One is that over historical time, we notice that the voice, to make a sound, most people can do that. The vocal cords are developed. And, when we didn't have a civilization and we were all in the jungles and the forests and the savannas, there was no security systems. We had to keep ourselves safe. So my hypothesis is the vocal cords were developed to make noise, so that if somebody was coming at me, I could yell at them or get them to go away. And so the vocal cords but we didn't need to hear much. We just needed to hear, was that twig snapping in the forest a panther, or tiger, or a person, or was it dangerous? We needed danger signals, not the complexity of a conversation. So
interesting.
The ear physically didn't get developed because it wasn't utilized for reception. And so consequently, it's way behind the vocal cords. So in order and what we've found is you can increase the listening quotient if you practice, did I get it? And practice breathing, slowing down, relaxing, and saying, can you say that again? Your ear will increase its capacity to listen. So that talking and listening, the listening piece can grow to the same competence as the talking piece. Then you have a fully functional communication device.
Well, I really liked that you went for kind of an anthropological or biological history there, because I've been thinking a lot about one of the big problems that comes up in communication is I think we all feel like we are in our society trying to compete and fight for resources. And sometimes I feel like that fight for resources makes us hear defensively, listening for that little twig, like you said, behind us. So if one partner says, I need to go to bed early, can you put the baby to bed? The other person hears, she's trying to take something from me, and that feels similar and related in a way to what you were saying about biologically how we may have developed to protect ourselves rather than to give or assume the best.
Right. And let me add something. I have enjoyed studying the brain. Harville enjoys studying tipping points and things, and I've really enjoyed learning about the brain and how reactive parts of the brain are versus the neocortex, the new brain. And it's a 2.8 pound organ in everyone's skull that's considered the most complicated organ in the universe, and neuroscientists have simplified it in a lot of ways. So I want to share my favorite neuroscientist is named Dan Siegel, and we're actually friends with Dan. And I was reading a book that he was writing about his view of his view of brains, and the beginning of a chapter. So the first chapter was great. The second chapter was great. The third chapter, because I've heard him lecture, that was great. Fourth chapter. So this is really dumb. The beginning of the chapter read, most people don't know that tolerating ambiguity is the smartest way to live a life.
The sign of intelligence.
And I thought, doesn't he know that being smart is a sign of intelligence? And he said, but then after the next couple paragraphs, I began to get it. He said there's a part of the brain, and the earlier was, had described the vagal net and the lower brain that keeps you alive, thank God, and, reacts, protects you, but it's not a relational part. But the neocortex, there's the left brain hemisphere and the right brain hemisphere. Left brain is a rational in part of the neocortex, and the right brain is musicians, artists, people who want to create podcasts to get them into the world, and the innovators. And then and he said between the two, it was a part of the brain I'd never heard of. It's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And he said that's the part that you move beyond predication into wonder. And it releases the most relaxing neurochemicals that, as opposed in the lower brain, which we teach our couples who don't want to read brain science books, that everyone has a crocodile brain in your brain that keeps you alive, thank goodness, and it'll snap the other person if it feels like there's danger. But you need to be in the crocodile brain for certain things, but that's not the part of the brain to learn how to have healthy relationships. Because crocodile brains release adrenaline, cortisol, and toxic neurochemicals when their partner is different, and then they're mad. Just, how could you vote for that political party? That is stupid. I don't want to be around someone that does that. Right.
Why'd you load the dishwasher incorrectly, right? I mean, like from the, sort of most grandiose to the most trivial, why are you not more like me, right? You guys talk about that. Why aren't you more like me?
We have heard that, and it's so interesting you said that one of the biggest problems with couples is how to load the dishwasher at home. They can be both can be really, really, really smart, and both are great parents, and both are trying to make
and really dumb.
They fight about the dishwasher. But anyway, there's a part of the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex releases dopamine. When you're in that part of the brain, it releases dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. And that is those are the.
That's like what's that, like the quadrifecta? Holy cow! All the good stuff.
It's relaxing neurochemicals, and people who live in this part of the brain, they don't get sick as much. They have a stronger immune system to fight off COVID, and they live longer, and they have healthier relationships. But this is why, in addition to saying, Harville, I believe you just said so and so. And I can see why you said that. We are allowing another person to have their different view. We had then added to the sentence stems, is there more about that? To give a person, and we are told that phrase, is there more about that? That when you say that, the other person thinks, you care? You care?
Yeah.
Really want to hear more? And that is transformational for relationships. And so a story, when Harville and I almost divorced one day, even though we were really well known that about relationship help. One of my skill sets is improving Harville.
And she did. Look how great I am.
But
look at you, he's perfect.
Sick or tired of me improving him. He got really, really and so so eventually what he said, all I really want in my relationship with you, respect my private time, and just wonder about
be curious.
Be curious about me.
Curious. Boom. Yes.
And so then in the evenings, we often have full days, and we take a walk at night. And I would always structure the talk, say, Harville, how was your day? I'd love to hear that. Now we take walks, and I don't ask him any questions. I enjoy looking at the leaves, looking at the squirrels, looking at the if there are any butterflies. And I tell people I'm the winner when I shut up, stop talking, and just learn to wonder.
Yay, Helen. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing, right? I mean, and just to rewind for all the folks watching and listening, what Helen is saying, she looked at herself rather than, Harville, like after trying to, after everything else failed, you're not fixing him. You said, oh, how can I change? I love that. Right? Like that is it.
And then I also decided to get little joke books and funny things, especially when we had our kids at home. He would sit with one or two of the kids and ask jokes across the table. I would have to back and forth. You can't laugh and be anxious at the same time. So we then thought, what would bring joy and fun? Who has time to have fun these days? Well, it's healthy.
Oh, hallelujah. Yeah. No, we actually talked about this on a previous show. Yeah, that's also not a nice to have, but a need to have, right?
It's got to be a priority.
But I want to come back. I want to underscore a couple things. One is I just love your courage and your self-awareness, Helen, and just again for all the folks listening, how we are so inclined to fix our partners, right? And how damaging and dangerous that is. I mean, it's back to the verticality because it's saying, I mean, you're not saying it in words, but you're saying it in every other way. I know better. I'm superior, right? You're back to that lack of equality. Right. And I feel like it takes a lot of self-awareness and quite honestly, maturity to go like, shit, that's, excuse my language, but like, that's what's happening. And then for you to change it, Helen, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I thought he would be the winner, but I was the one. I love.
Yeah. Well, you both are. It's mutual, right? I mean, that's the beauty of it.
So I want to add again, because I've been trying to make clear we can talk about this and it's like, just shape up, but it's a profound conversation in the sense of it
really is,
what the nature of the brain is and how our ears have been shaped over time. So we need to really respect the fact that this is challenging, not because you are defective, but because there are certain limits that are built into our neurophysiological cognitive systems. Pardon me for using a big word, but that's all of that. I want to add to that another simplification. Our brains are also designed to be self-referential, meaning to look at myself and unconsciously assume that what I see is objectively real.
Right.
Therefore, don't you see that? You don't see that? Then you don't see reality. I see reality. And so in order to assume that you're okay, you have to see what I'm seeing. Now, the thing I want to say is that is totally impossible. I cannot see anything that you see the way you see it. My brain is self-referential. So that's why I have to listen to discover how you're seeing it. And then I have to say, okay, so there are two ways to see this. It's like somebody one time gave me an example to make this really simple. I will bite this orange, then tell you how it tastes. You will bite the same orange, and you will tell me how it tastes, and there will be two different descriptions of the same orange. That is natural and that's reality. So we have condensed that phenomenon into the biggest human problem for couples and everybody on the planet is difference. Objection to difference is the biggest human problem. When you see things my way, we don't have a problem.
Right, exactly. Totally.
When you see things your way and report it to me as the way, we have a problem. And that's the normal conversation of everyday life. Is it too cold in here right now? Well, that depends on how the body reacts to cold. But it can react the same way. So what we have to do is come to terms with this reality. There's nothing but difference in the universe. From the smallest particle at the subatomic level to the largest galaxy, there's no sameness. There's no way for sameness to occur. It does not exist. Like one of the things that was so dramatic is to go look at a tree. It has probably got 40,000 leaves on it. They all look similar, but not a single leaf is identical to another leaf.
Yeah.
That describes the universe. So if you can start out knowing that there is a difference and then become curious, like, oh, how does the leaf look to you? Then you open then yourself to a new universe. But if I don't open to how does the leaf look to you, I just have my universe, and mine is parochial and limited to my experience. So I think that when couples get it, that objection to difference has caused all their problems. And if they can move to listening and acceptance of difference, 90% of their problems will go away. They'll move to collaboration instead of competition. Then they live in the joy of being. And while it's easy to say all these things, that is a very hard thing to do. And we need to be impatient with ourselves about that, patient with others. And when somebody says, I didn't get that, say, well, let me send that again. Let me say it again. Let me say it in a different way instead of, well, you're a bad listener. So no, you're not.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. You're not a bad listener. You just have a defective eardrum, but so does everybody else on the planet. And you have that. And the other thing to throw into this, I have my memory of my experience with Helen. So my inner narrative, my ineffective eardrum, and my memory of our previous conversations are all interfering with the accuracy of listening. So we have to really, and the way is to slow down is really a simple solution to it. Slow down and say, let me see if I got that, and then mirror it until the partner says, hey, you got it. Then you change. Then the other person can say something. And now you have a safe relationship where wonderful things can happen. Because if you have a dangerous relationship, only one thing can happen. You'll defend yourself from your partner. Then your partner will do that with you. So I just wanted to get that in before we run out of time.
Yeah, it's interesting that we have like the accepted difference in perception, right? Like you said before, like, oh, is it too cold in this room? Like, I'm fine, but are you too cold? Or is this food too spicy? Like, we have all these accepted differences in perception, yet literally seeing or feeling is the same instance, right? Like, it is all unique to any one of us.
It's unique.
So true.
And it's so funny that like it sounds so simple as like, oh, it's literally just a difference. But like you said, when we experience it ourselves, we view it as the truth instead of it being our perception, which is very fascinating. Real quickly, like I know you guys are running a little bit low on time. I was on your website and I saw this quote from Alanis Morissette about your book. And that's amazing. How did you guys get in touch? How did she reach out or like, how did that happen?
Well, Alanis got interested in Imago and is trained as a facilitator, which is a non-clinician who teaches a dialogue in her profession. So she has a certification in Imago dialogue as a facilitator, not as a therapist. So we got to meet.
That's so cool.
Wow.
And so she trained with a guy in California, Bruce Crapuchettes, and his wife, Francine. And so given that it wasn't a clinical relationship, it was okay for him to tell us about her. If she'd been blind, he couldn't have talked about her, but since she was a student in an education class, he could. And the other thing is that in 2010, Ellen and I started a think tank to which we invited a variety of people: John Gottman, Dan Siegel, and Joanna Davis, and Ellen Bader and her husband Peter, to our ranch to start a think tank about, could we we're all relationship experts. Could we, but we're in the clinical world, and the public doesn't have the benefit of what happens in the clinic. Could we come together if we could take our relational skills out of the clinic into the public? And that's what led ultimately to Safe Conversation. I don't know how she got aware of that. We may have invited her, I don't know. But she showed up at that think tank twice a year for about 3 years. So we got to know her really well. And in fact, she named the think tank. It was called Relationships First. We sat around, us academicians, we were talking about the Relationship Institute, the Relationship Center. We had all kinds of academic, non-exciting titles. And she said, why don't we call it Relationships First? And thought, wow, that's what we're about, relationships first. So she's a friend.
And
that's amazing.
She will answer, and she will actually answer our phone call.
And if there is time, I actually have 2 short stories.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we have time. We have all the time. You guys are if you're on the clock, we want to be respectful. But yeah, please go ahead.
We go soon, but so
Okay.
you have 2 stories.
Yeah, just because a notable name, Alanis, and I thought maybe you asked. I mean, I was talking about my first husband, and what did he do? Well, I am going to say another name that used to be notable in society. The gentleman's name is H.L. Hunt, and he was a cotton farm, and in Illinois, and they didn't have money, but I am H.L. Hunt's daughter, and so I know his story well, and he decided to explore the world. He was the youngest in his family, and he was being homeschooled, and one day he wasn't at home. It was about like not 10th grade or something, and he didn't even care about getting high school, finishing high school, and he jumped on the side of a train and became a hobo and explored the world.
Oh, wow.
And ended up in Texas, and he was at a poker game and won a oil field that they thought maybe there was an oil well there, but they didn't know. But he won that called the Daisy Bradford well. Well, so he won it, and when they drilled, it was a gusher. And then they drilled more wells, and it became the East Texas oil field became the biggest oil field in the world. So my father, H.L. Hunt, created Hunt Oil Company. So he wanted to marry me. He just wanted to work at the oil company, not me. Well, then I heard this man talking.
This foxy gent.
And he was the youngest. His family was sharecroppers in Georgia. And that they didn't have much money. All they did was sort of pick cotton and a little vegetables and do what the owners of the cotton, they didn't own the land, but they developed the land. And he was the young of just like my dad. But they went to a church, and then he was a teenager, and they thought that there was a youth Sunday, and they asked Harville if he would teach as a teenager a little bit. Harville loves to talk. So he actually, when he eventually got a degree, and none of his family had done, they were sharecroppers people, like dad practically, and then but because he then won a speech contest, and he got he was able to get the money to go to college, and he eventually got degrees, and then he was hired because of his excellent reputation. When he graduated, he was hired by a school in Dallas in the theology department, and he taught religion and psychology. And I was getting my master's in counseling psych. So this is how Harville and I met each other. And it's just, I have thought that my dad created a fuel that saved apparently World War II. He's credited, Hunt Oil is credited with Hitler didn't win World War II.
He's credited because he supplied the fuel that made it possible to win World War II.
Wow, that's incredible.
And he was on the cover.
That's quite a legacy.
He was, and so and he was on the cover of Time magazine around that time.
Oh, wow.
This man, because of him, provided the oil that won World War II. So he was my dad, and I heard this guy talking about another kind of fuel that can transform civilization. And
got it.
Putin needs to learn about the United
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
needs to teach dialogue. Like it's so simple to learn. This guy, again, a genius at simplifying the complex. So I was really, really, really smart at proposing to him.
And Helen, I want to add something to your story about your father.
Okay.
And this could probably be our closure, because it just occurred to me on the wall in one of the rooms at Hunt Oil Company today is framed a saying of H.L. Hunt, and it's still there. And it said, "Since God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, we should listen more and talk less."
Now,
that is, amen.
Well, so he proposed dialogue long ago, but we just didn't know it.
Yeah.
And do we have time for a short story of a couple? One of the things when you come on, give an example of a couple who has used it.
Yeah.
I could do this
if you guys have time, we would love it. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
We did one of our weekend workshops where Friday night the couples come and they've heard about the book and Love You Want, and they know we're going to give a lecture for the weekend, Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, 2 or 3 hours, and Saturday evening. And then they sleep at the retreat center Sunday morning, 3 more hours, then that's over. And they have lunch and go home. And we often ask for feedback at the end. We tell all of them that now we know Friday night you've come here with some problems, or that maybe why didn't go to another subject on the retreat, where you could have attended another topic of a book. Friday night you may have some problems. So we're first going to share some information about dialoguing, and we'll make it very, very simple. And then you go to bed. And so we just teach them to take turns, giving each other an appreciation. Within Saturday, tell them how to handle problems in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. And then Sunday morning, the last part of their problems, and then we say goodbye. But at the ending, Harville said, "Now, would anyone like to tell the story of what it was like to be here for this 3-day gathering?" And people gave examples. And then at the end, one man raised his hand and he said, "I'd like to share." And we said, "Okay." So he took his wife and she followed him. He was a very handsome guy, and so was she. And he held up some papers to how many couples? Probably 80 or 90 or 100.
Probably.
He held up papers, didn't say a word. Said, "These are our divorce papers."
Oh. Oh, wow. Holy smokes.
Threw them up.
That's dramatic.
Threw them. He said, I want this room to know I came here with my biggest enemy and I'm leaving my best friend.
Oh.
This is how quickly you tell the story to say how quickly, if you were given the information where you could take it in. So like my dad, it's a new fuel to save the world.
But with that in mind, and I start thinking about how we are at war and in conflict all the time, and I just feel like this should be going to the UN, and we should be doing this across the world, right?
Guess what? Your podcast might help get the word out. So thank you.
That's why we're here.
Well,
no, genuinely, that's why we're here.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That is our goal, Joanna. We have a global social mission with Safe Conversations to reach the tipping point of the world's population in 2050, which will be 9.8 billion people. But we only have reached the tipping point, which is 3.2 billion. So we're headed toward doing that. And we've, reach a tipping point, the system collapses, and this verticality will disappear into laterality. And then the new and next stage of human evolution will be a relational civilization rather than an individualistic civilization. So that's what we set out to do, and we need 30 more years of health and living to pull that off. Although people are telling us in the new age of new ways of distributing information that we may be out of date in distribution, that we may be able to do this in 10 years now. People are saying, people are in the field of new forms of distributing information are saying, there's stuff now you can deliver the whole stuff to the whole planet at once. A message. In fact, somebody told us the other day about reaching 2.3 billion people with a marketing ad. And cool. And he's saying, this is the guy we're going to talk to who's also connected to the UN, who says, you don't maybe have to wait for 30 years. Maybe, it's going to take, people have to get it and then practice it and integrate it. So it may take 5 or 10 years instead of 30. But that is the goal. It's like, why aren't people taught listening dialogue in school? It would be the most important thing for them to learn, because they would then learn how to be in relationship. And we now know scientifically that the quality of your relationship determines the quality of your emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being.
And your life. Well, what's interesting is there's so much around social and emotional development. We lived in New York. We live in Colorado now. But I never hear the schools talking specifically about relational wellness.
No.
Right? And this kind of very specific methodology that you guys have developed, so I applaud your ambitions and just the incredible work that you've done, the proof that you have, right? We're obviously here as your friends and partners to help accelerate it. We don't have 30 years. I've got kids. I want it to be a better place for them today. Right? And I'm grateful for the chance. You guys have done the research. You've been doing this for decades. And so, all right. So we always like to do the wrap up and the takeaways, because this is not a podcast to sit back and listen to and just enjoy. Yes, please do those things. But we want to affect change, right? So everybody listening here, please tell your friends, all that good stuff. But I always feel like change starts with each of us.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to try to, there's been a lot of good stuff, but I'm going to try to sublimate this down to the 3 or 4 takeaways that I hope are most actionable, or, the things that people can really kind of glom onto. First, listening is the first act of love, like very, 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 very foundational. And then that the objection to differences is one of the foremost, if not the foremost, problems impacting relationships. That we think we have an objective truth, but there isn't an objective truth when you're in a relationship, whether it's with your child, your spouse, whoever it is. So the antidote to that is to slow down, right? When you're in conflict or feeling like you're not being seen or heard, or there's something contentious, slow down, get curious. And now when you're doing dialogue, the important thing is to have a receiver, a sender and a receiver, and for the sender to share what they want to share, and the receiver receives it and asks, did I get it right? They reframe it, they repeat it. The sender says yes or no, kind of not quite. They go back and forth. One say, yes, you got it. Then the receiver says beautifully with an open heart and sincerity, is there more?
Yes.
And the sender says, no, I think you got it. And that's great. Or, yeah, you know what? Actually there is. And the whole point in this process is genuinely to listen, for both parties to genuinely be curious. And the final thing I'm going to say is, for everybody listening, and I'm going to put my hand up, first, because I'm listening here too. I'm a student of all this. It is just a cool theory unless you do it, right? So I'm going to ask everybody that's listening and watching, whether it's with their child or their spouse or their sister or whoever it is, wherever there's that little bit of conflict, to put this into practice and watch the transformation happen. Because what Harville and Helen have been doing for 4 decades is genuinely transforming lives. And what I love about their ambition is now it's not just in the hundreds of thousands. Now we're talking millions and billions of people. Like, let's be part of that movement to have those safe conversations in our communities and contribute to what is going to be I'm with you. I have every confidence in the world that this transformation is going to happen. It must happen, right? Because I do feel like society's at a breaking point with how much divisiveness and hurt and anger, and that can be turned around. And frankly, what's ironic is in some ways it's hard, and then in other ways it's just not that hard. Like, there has to be a willingness, but we've got to do the work.
Yeah, we got.
I know that was a very long wrap up.
Well, and people need to know there is another way to live, and I love the phrase "take turns talking and listening," and that sender and receiver is just take turns, because just because you let someone else speak and instead of responding you mirror them back, da 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 da, then make a time when it's your turn to talk and they listen. So, yeah.
I think I'd like to exit with one rather, what I think, powerful sentence, which is, whatever you do to others will be done to you. So want love in your life, love others. And then there's something in the universe that reciprocates that love to you. If you hurt other people, you will be hurt. If you love other people, you will be loved. So the most selfish thing in the world you can do is to love other people without conditions.
It's the mighty law of karma. Amen, Harville. That is a great final word. I mean, and it all starts with us, right? That's what Harville's saying. We want to be listened to, we got to listen.
Right.
We want love, we got to love, right? It all starts with us, folks. That's the good news. And that's what we're doing here at Open Relationships. We are transforming together. All right. Thank you so much, Harville and Helen. You guys are the BEST. Oh my gosh. I love you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Congrats on all your success, and looking forward to the next update as you guys continue on, this big ambition.
Well, we are so honored that you have us on your podcast, and we wish you well. And we'll see you down the path.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Thank you. Woo! That was amazing. I love Harville and Helen. I find them so impressive and wonderful. And I just love how they're so, aw shucks in so many ways. And yet they're these superstars. So it's cool. It's cool to hang with them.
It is easy to forget, like, so much of what we take for granted about what makes people work, like in relationships, comes from their work.
Yeah. Well, totally. Totally. Like really seminal work that has been adopted widely for 4 decades. And as they were describing or discussing, how many of the most influential thought leaders, from John Gottman to Dan Siegel to like literal rock stars, are taking cues from them. Like, it's cool.
Amazing.
And I also love
So, Jonas, what was your favorite take? Like one quickie takeaway. What was the thing that you're going to go home and you and Laura are going to work on tonight?
Well, I think it's the idea that talk is dangerous, right? Talking is dangerous. Talking is easy. It's the easy part, the easy way out. And the superpower is to develop the listening, but also to understand that what listening does for your partner, listening or your coworker, whomever you're dealing with, is that you're creating a space for that safe interaction, that supportive interaction that is critical if you really to build a relationship. So to me, it's that.
Yep. Amen. More listening, less talking, people. And I gotta take that advice. Bryon, how about you?
I mean, for me, I said it to them then, but like I'm still, blown away by the fact that like we're so accepting of different perspectives and perceptions when it's obvious, like, again, like eating spicy food or anything like that, where
the easy stuff.
But we literally do the same thing. They brought it up with the ear example, but like we even do that with our eyes. Like we know for a fact that the way that light hits our eyes, like it reflects off of, an object, and then that hits our eyes. And then the overall picture that we get is too complicated. And so it gets like dumbed down for our brain. So like inherently the way we process all of that information is going to change person to person. So like it makes sense that what they were saying, like the objective truth like doesn't exist really.
There is no objective truth, people. Totally. Yeah, there is no objective truth. I love that. And I just feel like, God, if we could implant that chip into people's brains, especially when they're feeling frustrated or argumentative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that.
I remember, I don't know, there's an old phrase that's like, there's your version, my version, and of the truth. Like, I don't know who first said that to me, but it is such a like colloquialism that matters so much in relationships. I was blown away when Harville was saying that in order to truly love Helen, he can't just see the version of her that he believes exists. He also has to love and see the version of her that she believes she is. He needs to know who she feels she is to love who she is. And then it really like knocked me over when he was like, otherwise I just love me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's like my mind.
That was so profound.
Yeah, super profound. But isn't that the problem that so many relationships face, right? Is we're all pretty narcissistic, and it's like me. But back to the subjective truth challenge, like we think it's the objective truth, and it's just not, right? And so it's like our own experiences and hurt and heartache and perspectives cloud, right? And so we're back to, it's like a do loop. But I love that. And then I was just going to add on to that. I love the little anecdote that she shared, and I obviously got a little fired up as she shared it, how she used to try to like correct and improve Harville. And it just makes me think how many of us do that. Like I think about, I do that with my kids, and I know I've done it with Sanjay, and even if I'm not acting on it, like I'm just thinking in my head back to effectively, if he could just be more like me, right? If he could just not, right? And I feel like what she realized is that she was being very corrective with him, which sucks, right? So I've actually really, I've tried to be much more conscious of this, but when I go home tonight, oh, that's right, I am home. I am really gonna like really take from everything you guys are saying and back to like, ooh, let me just see Sanjay for who he is and really like game on, dude, I love you, and hugs and kisses, right? Because I feel like so often we also kind of take each other for granted. So those are my takeaways. All right. Well, this was an amazing show. Thank you guys for all your input and questions and feedback. For our listening audience, thanks so much for listening and viewing audience. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate you guys very, very much. We would love your questions. You can write to us at openrelationships@yourtango.com. We would love if you would subscribe to the show wherever you're watching or listening, like and share, tell your friends about us. I'm going to be doing some live coaching, live recorded coaching. So if you feel like there's something you're willing to share with your relationships and feel like a convo with me would be helpful, I promise I get results. I've had so many great, enlightening, amazing, humbling conversations. And the truth is so many of them are not the same necessarily, but similar. Like we are all going through so many of these similar issues, and ultimately it always comes back to us. We're in the way, right? So let us know if you're willing to be on the show. Bryon, did I forget anything?
No, I mean, exactly what you said. Also, if the tea you're spilling is a little too spicy, we also do have the ability to mask your face and voice. You don't have to be on and spill your guts necessarily and like put your name on blast. But no, we'd love to have you on. Again, like you said, like, subscribe, share the video with your friends. And yeah, that's it.
And tune in. Yeah, keep tuning in. We've got some amazing guests coming up, and we're super passionate about the mission of fostering the human connection and opening up relationships. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
We're begging.